fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Fuel, the podcast for fixing underperformance and evolving leadership within the automotive industry. Fuel is bringing you the latest in proven strategies and techniques that can take your service department to the next level.
I left Van Tile in early 2010, got back into consulting. I was still working with Xtime. I took on an operational role with Xtime because by that point they were trying to roll out their service tablet, right? The check-in tablet. And they were having struggles with it. And, it was easy to see why. Back in the early days, there were no integrations between these tools and the DMS, or I should say very little integration.
Yeah, all third-party type mentality.
Exactly, right. And it meant a lot of double work for the advisors. They would have to go check somebody in on this tablet, then they'd have to turn around and practically go through the whole same exercise again, putting them into the DMS. So there were some initial challenges there with that. And so I was, doing a lot of field work out there, trying to help uncover it and dealing with some of their larger clients that were, obviously more significant to the business in terms of keeping them happy and keeping them moving forward. So I was happy to work with them on that. At that same time, a couple of my former associates from AutoNation had left there due to, there was a restructuring and they got a new boss. So they found themselves looking for a new opportunity. So the three of us got together and formed a company called Next Level Automotive Group. Next Level still in business today. The primary guy that we were working with was a guy named Dean Estep. Dean was doing all kinds of contract training work for us at AutoNation. Hands down the best workshop facilitator in the auto service industry that I had ever had the privilege to work with. He just had a way of reaching people and that was important to us at AutoNation, right? I don't know if you've heard, we had rolled out a 10-step service sales process back then. And that's not easy in any dealership, but when you start talking about 250 stores to, put together a 10-step service sales process and actually make that come to life, make that come to reality in that many locations, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of salesmanship. You got to get your people on board with that. You can't just expect to send out a memo or an email and expect everyone's going to get it and follow it. And next thing you know,
definitely going to immediately find ways to poke holes in it. Yeah, they're going to find ways to poke holes in it.
Right. Because a lot of times that's what happens in our industry. We come up with a great idea, and it is a great idea oftentimes. But if we don't turn around and go and really sell that idea to where, we can make sure that they're not just going, okay, in front of us. And of course we leave and then nothing happens, right? We really have to reach them and get them on board. And that's what, Dean did better than anybody I'd ever seen. So Greg Manson, myself, and Dean Estep formed Next Level Automotive Group. And luckily, we immediately got a client, a former market president from AutoNation, found himself running a dealer group in Colorado that also had stores in the Northeast. So, we got an immediate contract with them, started doing a lot of development work, a lot of, work on trying to come up and develop new pay plans, implement pay plans. And so we had a lot of fun doing that. We really did. The only thing that got me out of that was my former boss from AutoNation, a guy named Kevin Westfall, he had left AutoNation. That was the guy who left that all of a sudden, next thing you know, Greg and Dean are looking for a new opportunity. Well, Kevin left because he was opening up a used vehicle supercenter of all things.
There you go.
Called Auto America. And it just so happens that he was going to open up the first location here in DFW, Texas, at a former AutoNation Superstore location. So I really loved working for Kevin. He was a lot of fun to work with. Probably one of the easiest guys for me personally to ever work with, because I I'm not always easy to work with, but Kevin and I just always really hit it off. But so I left that. I still had some ownership in it, but now it was Dean and Greg running it. I went to work for Auto America. I was basically helping get the whole recon operation, the processes identified and get all the staff hired and basically get everything in place. Ultimately our goal was to open up multiple locations across the country. Well, look, that is not an easy operation. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's not an easy operation to get up and running. They found themselves, having to go out and do some recapitalization. They actually wound up hooking up with a group out of the New York area, and ultimately Auto America is what became Vroom.com. So Vroom, opens up, they kind of step in there, at that point, because, growth was stymied. I already had Recon up and running. And at the same time, we're selling, X time to Cox Automotive. So we're now talking like late 2014.
Yep.
So when that happened, obviously, we had a nice liquidity event. Neil East, the guy who was CEO of X Time, smart, brilliant guy. I mean, he deserves, lion's share of the credit for getting that thing to the point where, Cox Automotive came in, made an offer, we couldn't refuse. So Neil ended up working for Cox Automotive. He had to sign a year contract and he was going to, continue to run it, but, Cox was owning it at that point. So around the same time, the guy running AutoNation's fixed operations decides that he wants to roll out the complete X-Time package, the tablet. The scheduling was already installed, but, they had a few other tools. So he was looking for someone to go do that. And that's how I wound up working for AutoNation the third time.
Circle back
a third time. Yeah. So that was, unfortunately the stores, the networks, the Wi-Fi networks and all that were not ready for that.
Yeah.
We put together a major project plan to go in there and basically, renew all of the Wi-Fi networks in probably 90% of the stores. And that was just a huge setback on time. So during that time, Neil ultimately left Cox, and we had started looking at some other potential solutions because it's like, well, let's use this time to see what else is out there. Because, at that time, there was probably 3 or 4 companies now that were in that same space. So we decided to look at it. And also AutoNation's CTO brought in a guy that was a software developer, genius guy. He's still there today. He talked to me about, hey, why don't we just develop our own? So we started doing that. And, so ultimately, we were a CDK, dealer group. Once again, back to the integration issue. So, you had to start building these integrations. All these things take an incredible amount of time. So, at the end of 2019, I retired from AutoNation. They had my boss, again, he left about 3 months earlier. It was time to leave AutoNation. There was a lot of turnover in the executive ranks at that point in time, to the point now today where I barely know any other people left at AutoNation, which is odd, for an organization that big. But, that's it in a nutshell. So I've been back in the consulting world now since 2020. When Dynatron came along, like we were talking about earlier before we got started, I had experience with Rome's. I had experience with Dynatron. Most of my experience with Dynatron was because of Kevin Smith. Kevin had brought in a group of industry consultants because he was like, hey, this platform is a great tool for you as a consultant to be able to, better help your dealer clients grow their business. And very true. I mean, to be able to have access to, real-time service data, be able to have access to that virtual 20 group data. There was 3,500 dealerships service data. We didn't, they didn't have any names attached to them, but we knew what brand it was. We knew what market they were in. We had all their sales data, like how many batteries are they selling per hour, how many tires per hour, how many alignments and brakes per hour. So this great sales tool that could really help us as a consultant go out there and, really better help grow our client's business. And Kevin just thought that, hey, the consulting world needs to know about this. So he brought a bunch of us in. And yeah, I mean, he was spot on. So that's really what got me hooked on the whole Dynatron platform. And then my experience with, the service pricing, optimization, I think that's highly underappreciated. We use the term pricing optimization, and a lot of people don't really even understand what that is, right? Well, what great experience it was to be able to, use that at, when we piloted that at the Van Tile store. And I was telling you earlier, we had one of the pilot stores that I put in there that I didn't think really had any opportunity. It was run by a great service director, really great manager, had his arms around everything. And as it turned out, that store showed the largest amount of financial bottom line improvement out of all 4 stores. So that really showed me that, hey, there's something here. We always talk about service pricing, right? And the need to stay competitive, but also realizing that we are a dealer service operation. We invest a ton of money on special tools. We invest a ton of money on technician OEM training. We have shuttle services. A lot of us have loaner car programs. We have really nice waiting rooms. So we offer a lot, right, that the aftermarket or independents just can't offer. So we don't have to be the cheapest, but we do need to be competitive because people are price sensitive on those commonly shopped items like oil changes and brake jobs and so forth. Right. So here's a program that was going to do all the mystery shopping for us on a quarterly basis. We determine who our competitors are in our local market, and they were, calling them up, price shopping them, filling out a database for us. And so that really allowed us, because more often than not, Keith, what we found was we were underpriced oftentimes. Our competitors who weren't dealers were actually charging more money for an oil change than we were. And a lot of times the same was holding true on alignments and all that. So until you really start looking to see what's out there and price shopping your local competitors, you don't know. And then you can't do it just once, right? You do have to do it on a regular ongoing basis to stay competitive. Because it's very easy to go in and just start raising prices arbitrarily, right? Because as soon as you raise a price, that is pure gross profit. It shows up on your financial statement the next day. So it's a great tool to go out there and leverage.
Yeah, you charge more, you make more. Easy.
Exactly, right? But if we go too far with that, right, we will start losing customers, and we don't find that out right away, right? That happens over time when all of a sudden, your customers start, calling up for an appointment, hear how much something is, or they start price shopping. So, that customer bleed happens slowly over time. And once it does happen, it's hard to get them back. So I can't underscore the importance of staying competitively priced enough. I mean,
how would you define pricing optimization? Like if you had to define it, how would you kind of lay it out there to say, if somebody was like, what does that mean? How would you kind of define that in your words?
I would define it as charging as much as the market can justify in your own market area, So that way your effective rate on your customer pay labor sales is as high as it should be. And then once you can get your customer pay effective labor rate up as high as it should be, that is going to turn around, right, and make our warranty labor rate increase requests
Yeah.
go through much more quickly, easily, and for a much higher amount, right? And that was, certainly the approach that they were taking. It's like, look, let's come in there and let's first focus on customer pay. Let's make sure your prices are competitive. Let's make sure that we're charging the appropriate amount. So let's get your customer pay effective rate up, where it belongs. And then we'll look at going and doing a warranty labor rate increase. So the two just stair step off each other in a way that obviously makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So that's
So
pricing optimization.
when you're when you're talking about this competitive nature, right? I mean, would you say that being competitive is what you have to be, of course, with the ongoing revolution of customers coming in and possibly leaving and coming back, so on and so forth. We want to retain customers. But then sometimes do you have to take that pricing optimization concept a little bit further and say, hey, listen, you may be one of the highest people in the market. I mean, somebody's got to be at the top. So you may be one of the highest people in the market, but the reason that you may be a little bit higher than some of the other stores is because of what you need to retain in gross.
Yes. Obviously it takes gross profit to run all these things, right? It takes gross profit to pay for a loaner car program. It takes gross profit to pay for special tools and for technician training. So all those things are what set us apart and make us unique from the aftermarket. But it also has a large cost. So our customers expect that we know their vehicles better than anybody else, and that if they want to bring their car to the expert, we are that expert, right? So we got to live up to that too, though. We can't simply optimize our prices and then provide them a poor experience, right? When we were talking earlier before we got started about the importance of people, right? So you can't do one at the expense of the other. You can't focus all your time on pricing optimization and then ignore your people development. The two of them have to work hand in hand, because even if you had the cheapest prices around, if your people don't know how to work with your customers, because let's face it, our advisors primarily, but also our receptionists, our cashiers, they are the face of the dealer. And if they're not handling our customers in a way that is pleasing and retains them and keeps them coming back, it really doesn't matter how cheap we are. Nobody wants to deal with that, right? But the flip side too, providing a great experience and good quality people who know how to deliver that experience, that will justify to some level of having a higher price, to where, like you said, someone has to be the highest, and that's almost always going to be a dealer. But there's a limit to that, right? But definitely having well-trained people who know how to handle customers, to keep them retained and coming back and be that face of the dealership, that is critical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's the aspect of value, being able to assess that value. Why does anybody go to a steak? I say this all the time. Why does anybody go to a steak restaurant and order a cheeseburger? Why in the world will we do that? So that's that perception of value. But I think explaining to your team, explaining to your advisors, and definitely, understanding that back end concept, like, yes, we are going to be higher in certain aspects, for the value that we're going to be able to bring, but because we've got to be able to retain that gross. And then that leads into, kind of the structure that's built into the store. If you're going to have high level players in your store, if you're going to have top tier service, you got to recruit the best people, and those don't come cheap. So if we're going to have the best people, if we're going to have the best things to present to the customer, then we're probably going to be at the top of the market in a majority of things. But how can you deliver on your value? And that would kind of be like the biggest aspect of that. And I think through all the stuff that you've gone through today, you've done a lot, and circled back a couple times to a couple areas. And how dare you say you just got thrown into the trenches when you worked at Sears? That never happens in the industry. How dare you say that?
I think that
You
happens
know?
to just about everybody in the industry, doesn't
That's
it?
right. So yeah. So I mean, I think that the development that you've seen over the course of the years, the eye-opening processes that you've seen, everything had value associated with it. So it's worth spending that amount to have what you need to have. But I think that it's a big aspect that is extremely overshot when we're talking to people about adjusting and discounting.
Yes.
Getting them to understand, when you give away $1, it could take $100 to recoup that. And so, in the aspect of what you're doing and how you're doing it and how those changes can implement things, like you said, technology and the way we're coming with technology these days is imperative to be able to have those instantaneous results and be able to project those results.
Certainly is. Well, look, we talked about it earlier, but you're a service coach, so you're working with a lot of service directors. How overlooked is it typically? Because when we start adjusting these prices, this has a major impact on our service advisor psyche a lot of times, right?
Yep.
They think, oh my God, they're raising prices, we're already too high. Because that is their belief a lot of times. They think that the prices there at the store are already too high, and now you're going to raise them. Now, that's not always factual, but I mean, how often do you encounter where, you know, service directors, for whatever reason, just oftentimes overlook the significance of really going back and making sure that the advisors not only know about the price change, but understand that it is still a competitive price and get them bought into it before they just go out there and start working with it.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest question I always tell my people to ask, why aren't you worth it? Why aren't you worth it charging? That's my question.
Yeah.
You think I just dreamt this number and just came up with and threw it against the wall? No, it's a strategical and analytical approach with what I have. But why aren't we worth it? Why aren't we allowed to think of ourselves in this aspect? And the second question I ask them is, when did you become a financial planner? It's like your perception of a customer is solely based off of what? You haven't talked to them. You don't know what their situation is. There's a funny situation I had years and years and years ago when I was working at for my dad. My dad had me doing all kinds of crazy stuff when I was young. But there was a guy that came in. At rural town, North Carolina. Guy came in. He wanted to buy a Chevy truck, big truck. He had overalls, t-shirt on, a raggedy t-shirt. He had a chew in or whatever, and he had a bag. He had a bag with him, like a brown bag. So he walks into the front of the store and he kind of looking around. He goes, looks at a couple trucks, and he's kind of looking around. Ain't a single salesperson talking to him. Ain't nobody talking to him. And I'm sitting there watching what's going on here, and I was like, what is happening? Like, what is this? What is going on here? What is this dude doing? And so finally somebody gets up and says, "Sir, can we help you with something?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm here to buy a truck." Okay, like a used truck or something like that. And I'm like, "No, I'm here to buy a truck." And so finally, yeah, at the end of it, he ended up buying a truck. The brown bag's full of money.
Isn't that funny?
It's full of
And that
money, and
happens
he is
all over the place, doesn't it?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, yes, they use this in some kind of sales techniques as you can kind of get an address of how people would take care of their vehicles with what's in their vehicle or how dirty it is and things like that. And have I dealt with people that have had pizza boxes in the back that have been there for a while? Absolutely, but people get busy. So
Yeah.
if they get an opportunity to take care of their investment, you never know what you're going to get, and it's very interesting to me how some people like to just throw money at it with a discount whenever you could said, hey, listen, for experience you got today, I'm gonna give you free detail. How nice is it to be in a clean car? And so I think that getting the advisors and getting people to understand the reason we're making these changes isn't to just make money. It's a reinvestment opportunity. With the gross that I have, I can look at raises. I can look at infrastructure. I can look at things instead of just creeping by being competitive in the market. But like you said, you have to do it the right way. You got to get your people to be empowered. You got to get them to see the value of what they're doing, and then give the customer a chance to say no. Not
Absolutely.
pre, yeah, not pre conceived notion. Like I can't wait to
Right.
show this guy this ticket. Oh boy, he's going to flip out. Well, calm
Yeah.
down,
We're always
settle down.
pre-qualifying, right?
Pre-qualifying. That's a
Or
perfect
we're
way of saying it.
projecting our own financial situation on our customer, thinking,
That's
oh,
a good way of
$1,000,
putting
that's a
it.
lot of money for me. And yeah,
That's a
I do.
very good way of putting it too. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've trained a lot of service advisors over the years too, and that was one of the biggest things I found is that when they're approaching customers with additional service requests, they're a lot of times they're projecting their own situation, how they would react to
Mm-hmm.
this list of repairs and services that are needed for $2,000, and it's just like right, you really got to reach them and tell them that that's it. You don't know your customer's situation, but what we do know is it is our job. I mean, it's our responsibility, right, to inspect vehicles, tell customers exactly what's going on, don't exaggerate things. But on the other hand, we can't soft pedal things either. If we see, a problem, or especially if it's a safety problem, that is our responsibility. We literally could wind up in some significant legal trouble if
Yes.
we don't present these things. And believe me, if an attorney is defending a client who had a breakdown or a failure that led to an accident or something worse, you bet they're looking into that. There's no question they're looking into that.
Yes, sir.
Right. And they find it a lot of times when they look into it because, a lot of times they may see notes written on a hard copy, but those notes, there's never any evidence that it was actually presented to the client, which is, one of the great things about today's tools, right? We have all these great electronic tools, video MPI, video ASRs, where customers are approving these things electronically now. So we've got a lot of great tools in the industry now to prevent that. But, again, right, to the point we're talking about, it always gets back to having to make sure that our people know these tools, know what they're for, know how to use them, and are sold on them. Because, even something like an electronic tool, at first, yeah, it's going to take them some time to learn that and get efficient with it, right? That was always the big problem with the check-in tablets, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, but I don't have enough time. It's like, look, this will save you time now. In today's world, it will. Maybe
It
5,
save
10
you a
years
lot of money, and you take a picture of that dent or that scratch that was there before you took the vehicle back.
Yep, exactly. So there's just all kinds of great tools
Wasn't there before.
right. But getting back to price optimization and all that. Yeah, I think we see this exactly the same way. This is about not being the cheapest. We don't necessarily have to be the most expensive, but I tell you what, to your point earlier, someone's got to be the most expensive. But if we have to be providing a level of service that they can't get just anywhere. And again, that gets back to the whole people, development thing that we talked about earlier. The other thing that I've literally had the privilege to be in hundreds of dealerships over the years now. And the one thing that, I see missing a lot of times is, we talk about these foundational elements, right? So certainly, operational foundation is, having our processes identified and trained to, having our people accountable. But the thing that, is often missing is a financial foundation. And by that, I'm really talking about an annual and a monthly budgeting tool, forecasting tool. We all in the industry, we all create an annual forecast, right, at the end of the year for the following year. But I would say more often than not, what I've seen happen with those annual forecasts, oftentimes they're the GM or the dealer is telling the service manager, well, I want you to forecast, an extra 5% for next year. Okay, so they do that. They just take all the totals and they add 5% on this. Okay, here's my annual forecast. But after, a few months of not hitting that, it just gets pushed to the side. Nobody talks about it anymore. It's become totally without value. And we're missing an opportunity to create meaningful financial forecast, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, bringing science into that annual forecast would be just a huge element that, any of my clients, we would certainly be looking at starting with that, right? It's like, okay, how much do you want, right? You want to grow the business by 10%? Okay, great. Well, that's not going to happen without planning for it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
We know how many technicians we have. We know how many hours they've been averaging. We know what our effective labor rate has been. We know how many ROs are coming across the service lane, right? These are all inputs into our financial numbers at the end of every month, right? Well, these are all levers that we have. So if we're using the right type of forecasting tool, and that's why, Dynatron has TechCF. Well, I felt very privileged and honored to be, and to help develop that tool when you guys first started working on that a couple of years ago. I had a 31 store client at the time that, I had brought Dynatron in and said, hey, go ahead, do an RO survey, tell me what you think. I mean, at that point, I had seen some pricing opportunities there in the financials. I saw some, customer pay labor margin opportunities and all that. But I was like, hey, I don't need to tell you guys anything. Come in, do a DMS poll, and let's see what you guys think the opportunity is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a funny story because they came back with something that just sounded incredible. It was gonna, basically bring in about another $7 million in additional gross profit by the end of the year. And when I presented that to the executive team there, they literally laughed at it. Oh yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah. And how much is this? So, I mean, luckily, I had, good relationship with Les at that point, and he, really worked with me to get them sold on the idea, saying, look, this, they're not giving us a pie in the sky projection here to get our business. That would serve them no purpose to get our business for a short amount of time, and then they don't deliver, and next thing you know, we're an unhappy customer, and we're not going to renew and all that. So that proposal they gave us, to make a long story short, they actually ended up exceeding what they told us.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, no, it was a very pleasant surprise, obviously. But, one of the things when they were talking to us about, getting the business, I said, look, can you guys develop a tool? You have all the inputs for it. This was a tool that we were using, at Automation a long time ago. PPTS, a lot of people that worked for Automation over the years have heard of its production planning tracking system. And it was just a souped up spreadsheet at that point. So it did all these things, right? It looked at all these inputs, and it allowed you to use those inputs to create an actual monthly and annual forecast. But there's a lot of key punching that had to be done, right? So every day, somebody had to key punch all the technicians' hours into the spreadsheet.
Take it from here, put it there. Take it from there, put it here.
Yes, yes. It was a very well-loved tool for that reason, as you might imagine. But I tell you, the market level and the regional level, people out in the field, they got it, right? Because when you're doing that, it made their job easier, because they could go in there and look at that tool, because we had a roll up for it. So they could look to see where they were at, based on actual hours produced. Because, if you're only looking at a financial statement, or you're looking at closed ROs, it doesn't really give you a lot of great input into, what's in process and what, what they've got to work with when they go to close the month out. So the field team loved the tool. The stores where they were having to do all the key punching, they weren't, huge fans of it for that only reason. But So they agreed to say, hey, yeah, okay, it makes sense to us. We'll go ahead and develop it. So that's what your tech CF, that's what that is basically. It, I can't say enough important things about that because look, you're never going to consistently hit your goals if you don't. Let's say it's June right now. August is coming up. August is typically a big month in our industry, right? Well,
Mhm.
if you've got a number that you've projected in that annual forecast, how do you know if you're going to make it?
Correct.
Well, Tech CF is going to tell you, well, based on the people that you have right now, if everything stays the same, given the number of work days in August, all this is what you're going to hit. So you already know what you're going to hit because it also looks at things. Do you have technicians that are scheduled for training that month? Because that's
That's
something
right.
we always forget about in this industry, right? We build these projections thinking that everybody's going to be there every day of the week to produce hours, when the reality is that's not true. We have school, we have sick days, we have holidays, we have vacation days. So the cool thing about Tech CF is it takes all that stuff and it builds it into the process. It does all the technician hours. It automates that, so the service directors now don't have to do anything except help build it to be able to meet that number. So if your dealer principal tells you, I want you to grow the business by 10% next year, you've actually got a roadmap now that's going to tell you how to do it.
Yep.
And if you're starting to fall short, it's going to point it out to you in a very obvious way. But then it's also going to give you all these levers. Well, let's see, I can go in and look to see if I do have maybe I have a pricing opportunity on a high velocity item. Maybe I can raise the price of my oil change by $1 each. Well, annualize that. That's a big deal. Or maybe I can increase my alignment or my brake jobs. Or maybe I can go and sit down with my technicians. If we're doing it right, every month we're sitting down with them and we're talking about their hours produced. We're talking about where they're at. We're talking about what their goals are. Are they going to hit the goals? Well, what a great opportunity to sit down and say, look, we're running a little bit behind right now, but I count on you for just an extra 2/10 a day. Or go to my advisors when I'm doing my monthly review with them. Say, hey, you're averaging this. Do you think we can just get? It's such a great tool because it's going to apply science to that annual forecast. It's going to keep it relevant the entire year. So if you start looking down the road and you're like, oh, wow, there's no way I can hit that number in August with what I've got, you're going to have a runway now to start looking for those extra technicians, right? Because as we know, one of the biggest issues we got in this industry is finding enough qualified technicians. So we need a runway. We can't just say, oh, wow, I need 2 technicians in August and it's July 15th and think that we have any chance at all of having those technicians on board and productive by August 1st. Just not going to happen, right? In most cases. So I can't say enough about the importance of having a financial foundational tool that your service directors are using on a daily or weekly basis to keep that thing pointing north so that those objectives are hit. It is just as important as anything else, except perhaps that people development we already talked about, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's
Well, I
going
mean, I think
to.
if you take less of the checking boxes mentality, I got to check this box to check that box to put this information here, because that's the majority of the time. Anytime you bring something like this is okay, this is just something else. I think it's ill perceived. But now, if you, like you said, when it becomes a little bit more automated, it allows for a lot of people to come up with new aspects,
Yep. Right.
and a couple of conversations I've already had with customers about Tech CF is like a what if tech. So now they're putting in what if techs. They'll put in a blanket tech, putting the parameters. And if I had a guy like this, what does it do to my business? It's also really started to highlight the misconception of effective labor rate versus labor gross profit. Just because you have a good effective labor rate doesn't mean that you're doing good in labor gross profit in some cases. In some cases, I've seen people have huge lifts, but then go backwards. Why is that taking place? So now it gives you the aspect of understanding, hey, if I want to get you guys a new alignment rack, well, either I got to charge, $275 for alignment, or I've got to cut your tech time, from 1.5 to 1.2. And now it's justifiable to be able to project it. I even had another innovation of this guy with a union store, which this was pretty cool how he kind of came up with it. He has to give raises. It's part of the union. You got to do it. You got to give raises, right? Well, now he goes in and he presets his raises for all of his people. So he immediately can see if we're in June, well, what happens in November? What happens in August? Where is his labor GB projected with the raises that go ahead and encompass that? And if he starts to lose GP, he knows he gets to go back to perfect pricing. He gets to go back to pricing and optimization. Make a couple of tweaks. I see a couple of technicians with this pay is going to go up in hours of what they do. So I need to tweak it in that aspect to retain my gross. And even like you said, you were building in certain time, allocating training, holidays that they take and things of that nature. But what about mentorship programs now? He's there. He's there for an 8-hour day, but 4 hours of the day he may be helping or doing the mentor program.
Great point.
And now,
Yeah.
now you filter that in and then see the production when he's mentoring versus what he does when he's actually turning. So yeah, I mean, I think it lays out the roadmap as long as it's understood about how it's going to giving and impacting people's more time. I mean, that's the number one thing, especially with service managers that don't know who we are and their DP just signs them up on it and don't tell them about it. Like, what am I doing now? This is just another thing. Well, I've got to go ahead and start changing that mindset. All of this is designed to give you time more back in your day and you know how it is. You get more time to think about stuff. That's when you start to get innovation. That's when you start to get thinking outside the box mentalities. And that's what starts to revolutionize the industry.
Keith, that's probably a great point you just brought up, right? It's just another thing, right? Because
Mhm.
let's face it, there are a lot of other things in our industry, right? That can be viewed as, oh my God, I don't have time for another program. I don't have
Mhm.
time for this. I would have given my left arm for a tech CF tool like that back then that was automated. We totally understood, the key punching and doing it on a daily basis. Service directors are very busy people, but the point you just made, I couldn't agree with you more. Um, if we are able to proactively understand where our business is at right now and where not just where it's at right now today, but where it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now, that makes our job as a service director so much easier. So, I mean, some things are worth the investment of time. Some things aren't. But now when you look at a tool like this that, yeah, you have to spend a little bit of time up front with it, but that's the same amount of time you'd be spending creating your annual forecast. That's a one-time thing. Then from that point forward, you're only using it to check and make sure, okay, am I still on track? Am I going to hit my numbers 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now? And if not, okay, what do I need to do now to start preparing for that? And again, they've got multiple levers.
Yep.
Tech CF just brings all those levers, right? And it puts it
Well,
in
yeah.
one tool right there.
It takes
So
it to
it's not just
where,
another thing, that's for sure.
yeah, exactly. It takes it to where you said earlier, where we say, hey man, add 5% to this. And they do that, and then it kind of goes to the wayside. It takes it to where it doesn't go to the. We're not just trying to finish out with a good year. Let's
Yeah.
just finish out with a good year. Don't worry about the 5% anymore. I just want you to finish strong. No, 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 no. Now it's, are we on pace? Are we
Right.
on pace every single month? And if it does start to deviate 3, 4 months down the road, why? Why is it happening right now? What can we understand? Is it car count? Is it how we're dispatching work in some key cases? Is it our pricing structures we need to look at? Is it certain sales that we need to start be looking at more closely with the VPG or with a market or with an analysis? So I think back to what you said earlier, to get this projection, here's your number. You want a number? Here's your number. I'll let you know at the end of the year. Now it becomes more real. It becomes like, are we on pace because we can see it and we can track it? So I think that's probably another revolutionary aspect of the technology and the science behind it is
Yeah.
that it's not a guess. It's becoming less and less of a guessing game. Not throw it against the wall and see what sticks. It's like I can project this and I can have it, like you said, the path, the roadmap, the runway of here's how you can get to the end of the ultimate goal. You can achieve it and you can see it and stay on top of it.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities out there for us to grow our business, right? I mean, again, we're the dealers. We know we know our brands better than any independent or aftermarket service operator out there. And, with the complexity of today's vehicles, I mean, just continuing to ramp up year after year, you just look at something like, ADAS, right? All the, lane departure warnings, crash avoidance systems and all that. Well, these are things that are coming out on every car now, right? And it's only going to continue. Then the EVs, have all of this high technology in there. Well, when you think just about the neighborhood collision centers in your market, they don't have factory trained technicians. They don't have factory tools. They don't even have the floor space to do these types of ADAS like recalibration services or repairs. So they are very ill-equipped to handle it. Now, some of the big guys, whether we're talking about Boyd or Caliber, so a lot of these big boys, they're actually forming separate companies to deal with this because, they get it, right? They have to. They've got the wherewithal and the capital, obviously, to go out there and do this. But, your independent collision centers or your small 2 or 3, 4 location, they don't have that. And they're looking for someone to help them with this work. But what they can't do is they can't bring one of their customers' vehicles over to some dealership service department, drop it off there, hope that it gets looked at within, a timely manner, or hope they get it back within a week. Because let's face it, the collision repair center is graded so hard on turnaround time.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I mean, if they lose a week at a dealership service department, they're just not going to do it. And that's what's happening in many cases right now today. If it hasn't turned on a warning light on that car's dashboard, then they're delivering these cars back to the customer without doing any recalibration of these vehicles at all.
Wow.
And again, we talked earlier about, legal problems when
Yeah.
well, there's already attorneys out there looking into that. If a car is involved in a subsequent accident, right? So these collision centers, they want the help, they need the help. It's good money, it pays good money. We have to obviously have service level agreements with them, though. We have to want their business. We have to come up with a process that will get them turned around in a time frame that works for the collision center if we want that business. If we don't want that business, okay, let's just continue taking what's coming in through the door and not worry about it. But, obviously, if we own a dealership, we are trying to maximize our opportunity. And we're also trying to be the, who doesn't want to be the BMW dealer in that market that's looked at as to the experts, right? What a great label to have as the technology expert as cars continue to get more and more complex. This business is there. We can go after it. We can get it. It's lucrative business. Everyone's worried about, EVs are coming in. We're not going to have all this maintenance repair work. We're going to suffer. I disagree with that. I think the complexity of the vehicles is actually going to make it much more apt that customers, have to come to us because we've got the tools, we've got the training, we've got the people, we've got the right shop space to do all these, calibration. It can take a large amount of floor space to properly do a recalibration after an accident. And there's not a vehicle out there now that's manufactured probably since 2019 to current that if it gets into some sort of an accident or even hits a big pothole, that doesn't require some level of recalibration. And again, these collision centers don't have these tools. They're looking for companies like Aztec to have, some sort of a remote relationship. But Aztec doesn't have enough people, enough technicians to handle the industry either. So this is a challenge, but it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us as the local dealers to establish ourselves as the technical expert on that brand vehicle and go out there and let's get that business and let's grow that reputation. It's often overlooked still even today.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, hey, look, it looks like this is going to wrap up this episode of the Fuel Podcast. What I always love to do as we kind of wrap things down is give my guest the final say. So anything you want to kind of leave the guest with as we kind of wrap this episode up, sir?
But here is what I would say. Dynatron is a platform that is not just another thing. It is not only going to help you stay competitive on your pricing and optimize your pricing, but it's going to help you drive your business forward and hit your objectives and your forecasts. It will make your life easier as a service director and add profit to the bottom line. I mean, you guys offer some sort of a ROI guarantee now, right? I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm pretty sure you guys have an ROI guarantee where for every dollar that they spend on the program, they get, I don't know if it's $3 back and if it is 3-to-1, and I think it is, look, coming from a public company who was always, we always had to pass certain thresholds if we wanted to go out and spend money on some sort of a program or a project. And 3-to-1 is probably, 4 or 5 times higher than what that minimum requirement was. So look, this is something that works. I'm so happy that you guys are here and that you took this forecasting tool and turned it into an automated tool that is actually easy to use now. So what I would tell people is you need to see it, then you can make an intelligent decision. And if you need any help or input, or whether it's training or helping your service director get this up and running, I'm obviously more than happy to talk to you and see if there's something, see what your situation is and see if I can help you with that.
Awesome, brother.
So I would just leave
Thank you
with
so
that.
much.
Thank you, Keith. It was
You got it, brother, man. No, I appreciate your time today. So that's will wrap up this episode of the Fuel Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Thank you for joining another episode of the Fuel Podcast. Always be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to be notified when new episodes are being dropped. And click the link below to review any of the show notes for additional information. Or you can email the Fuel Podcast with the link, as we encourage any feedback or any questions or comments from our listeners. Until next time, I'm your host, Alex Keys, with the Fuel Podcast for fixing underperformance and evolving leadership.